Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. All praise and all gratitude due to our Lord, our Creator, our Cherisher, our Sustainer. And may His peace and blessings be upon all of His messengers and the prophets and the seal of the messengers, Muhammad, and his immaculate family and righteous companions, and may the peace of the Lord be upon you and with you, my dear brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin, let me extend my regards and my appreciations for the organizers as well as the attendees. The organizers, they work very hard. Brother Khalid, Sister Rabab, Sister Iman Birmani, also those who helped them, Human Saleh, Sister Fatma Saleh, Ali, Haj Samir, and many others who helped them to organize this session and to focus on something which is very relevant in our daily life, for those who are married and for those who are still single. Let me begin with a verse in the Quran in chapter 51, Surah Al-Dhariyat, chapter 51, verse 49. Allah, our Lord, stresses, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ. It's not only the human being are bounded by this relationship of marriage and family, but of everything we created them in pair. وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ. So you may be mindful and aware. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. So that's the most important institution. And there is no escape from this institution. You are trapped on this earth, and you cannot continue your journey on this earth single. You need to find the right person to be able to accomplish your goal and your objectives here on earth. So you cannot run away from this situation. You can't say, I would live by myself. That's not an option. That's not a reasonable or sensible option. Now let's come to the question that how do we prepare ourselves? There are three departments that we must work on them: the physical department, the emotional, and the financial. These trio are going to prepare us for a peaceful and productive marital life. Physically, you have to be able to perform your duties and your responsibilities. And when I say physical, it means someone has to be healthy. If someone is not healthy, he or she does not possess health, whether it's mental health, physical health, sexual health, then their marriage is going to be in jeopardy. So physically, they have to be prepared for that. This is number one. And part of being physically prepared: don't smoke, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't do any type of alcohol, to keep you healthy. I have seen some marriages, they fall apart because one of them insisted on smoking. They did not quit. Maybe we consider it something, very, something it's not important, it's insignificant. But it is. It makes a big difference when it comes to someone that you live with him or her 24 hours a day. Smoking becomes a big problem. So be prepared physically. Second, you have to be prepared emotionally. When we are single, we are only responsible for ourselves, not for someone else. We can conduct our life the way we love, and nobody can object. But when you build a family, when you decide that now I want to be with someone else, then this is the time for compromises. A lot of compromises, not just one or two. Every single day you have to compromise. Every single day you have to give concessions. Every single day you have to practice tolerance, perseverance, patience, understanding, sacrifice. So you have to be ready for it mentally and emotionally. If you think, I'm not ready, I can't compromise, I insist on my way of life, then don't get married. Don't put yourself in trouble, and don't destroy the life of another person and subsequently the life of your children. Don't do that unless you fix yourself mentally and emotionally. By the way, marriage itself, it's a fixer. It is going to fix. As long as we are determined, then we can get the medicine. But if from day one we are not ready to change and we insist on our way or the highway, then it's better not to get married. This is the second, part of the being emotionally and mentally prepared is not to be selfish. Is not to be sensitive or oversensitive. People who are oversensitive or even very sensitive, they are not going to enjoy their life. They are going to live in pain and misery and suffering. So you should not be sensitive. Life has good side and bad side. Every single day we meet very good people, very nice people, extremely good people, and on the other hand, we meet evil people on the same day, in the same day, in the same place. And life, it's a choice. So you have to be tolerant. You have to accept. And then the third element is to be ready financially. Poverty destroys your marriage. Not only your marriage, destroys your relationship with everybody, including yourself. You have to be ready financially to provide a decent life for your partner and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Said.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me here. Okay, so from a psychological point of view, the question was knowing yourself first. Okay. So what do we need to know ourselves? The first one is self-awareness. How well do we know ourselves? And this goes back to our childhood, our bringing, even further back to our attachment to our parents. What was our attachment like? And in order to do that, we have to be able to do self-reflection. And it's not easy. It's not easy to look inside and see your strength, but also see your weaknesses. And some unresolved issues, there will be unresolved issues, and there will be leftover issues. What happens when we do not take the time or willingness or courage to do that is what we haven't looked, what we haven't examined, unconsciously will spill over in our relationship, being with our significant other, with our children, or work. For example, if as a child I was moved around and I do not have that stable attachment due to, say, I come from a war-torn country and I was shuffled from one family to another, and I do not have that stability, what do I learn about myself? I'm going to learn, in order to be safe, I cannot be vulnerable, number one. I cannot attach, because attachment means loss. If I am with one family and I'm attached, before I know it, I could be yanked and go to another family. Therefore, for me, in that case, getting close is a danger. So I'm not going to let myself be vulnerable. I'm going to close off. So if I haven't resolved these issues in relationship, then I'm going to be emotionally what? I'm going to be emotionally closed off. I'm not going to let anybody in, because the fear, and this is unconscious most of the time, the fear is if I get somebody close, then I'm going to lose that person. So introspection is very important. You can do it through therapy or even through self-help books, so on and so forth. It's also good, again, when you do self-reflection, I cannot emphasize enough to go and look into the unresolved issues. It's also good to know about your aspiration and your dreams, because in marriage you're going to ask your partner to be your partner, to join and to be part of your dreams and aspiration and wishes. And how do we know, what my wishes are and what my dreams are? By the way, just to go back to the first one about self-awareness, the best way to do self-awareness is to be aware of our feelings. Our feelings are our parts that help us understand who we are, and also help us understand who we are in the environment and who the other person is. So knowing our feelings is the best way to know ourselves. Okay, so and the third part is be aware of your own changes. If you are going to ask somebody to change, your partner to change, you won't be able to ask that person to change unless you're willing to change yourself, number one, and also you won't be open to change unless you let yourself be vulnerable. Now, go back to number one. If you're not able to be vulnerable, meaning that if you're not able to see yourself and know your shortcomings and your unresolved issues, then it's going to be very difficult to be open to your partner. Before we ask our significant other, for example, to change their ways, we have to make our partner feel that we are understanding, that we're willing to listen and accept any kind of feedback from our partner. So these are the three major areas that I emphasize when we talk about self-awareness.
Thank you.
So like with the answer, I have kind of a sore throat, so just let me know. All right, first of all, Jazakallah khairan for Sister Iman and Layla for reaching out. Definitely an honor to be next to my teachers. Dr. Said, actually, she was one of my clinical supervisors when I was an intern, so it's definitely an honor to be amongst everybody. So a lot of the main points have been touched upon. I guess for me, I think it's good for people that are, trying to get into that state of mind of wanting to get married. We have to shift from the me mentality to the we mentality, if that makes sense. So as we grew up, at least in the United States, we grew up with an individualistic society, unless some of us here have been immigrants at an older age maybe. But usually we grew up with a me mentality, so it's like whatever you want to do, pick up, and you're gonna go and do it. You're not gonna really care about the other person, right? But in the case of marriage, we have to think about the other person. So once you guys are able to shift to that kind of mindset, it's gonna help with everything else that comes into play, because it is a state of your mind and your heart. And then both of the speakers brought up strengths. So there's actually this cool assessment you can do online. It's called Strengths Finder 2.0. It's based off a book. So you can actually see what your strengths are, in case you didn't know. So that's a good thing to use. Basically, yeah, you have to know yourself. So if you don't know your strengths, your weaknesses, and also if you don't know what you're looking for in a spouse, then you have to kind of take a step back and kind of see what your priorities are in terms of what you want to look at in terms of the spouse. And I think we're going to touch upon that, right? Okay, so that's a separate question that I'm alluding to. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you for that. I just want to follow up with just a few comments first about, Sara Said, you touched about the physical aspect, financial aspect. Of course, nobody wants to find somebody who's a bum, and you can't marry a bum. You need somebody who's productive and financially able to support, the family. But you talked about compromising. I think if you could just a little bit touch upon that, because I think a lot of that is what really, instead of being, which goes with what you talked about, Maryam, is that it's not about me anymore, it's about we. And that's where compromise comes in. And I think that is very much a key ingredient in when we are looking for somebody to marry, that we have to be able to compromise ourselves towards our partner in our life. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more about the issue of compromising, just to give it more feedback on that, please.
There is a good compromise and a bad compromise. You should never compromise the good principles and values. You should never compromise them. But however, there are things that are not super good. We learn them from our own childhood. We stick to them. And at the age of 23, 25, 27, when we get married, we also want to stick to these lessons that we learn, or habits, or manners. This is what I mean by compromising, because marriage is a partnership. Marriage, you are not an individual anymore. You are part of a nucleus called a family. You are a member. You admitted yourself to this membership, to this club. So welcome to the club. And this club has rules and regulations. So you have to do everything possible to satisfy the other side, but not to compromise on the good things. Not to be dragged with your spouse if he or she wants to teach you something bad, or they want you to give concession on doing something bad. This is not what I meant. I meant that both sides, they have pros and cons. So let's compromise to learn from each other, and this is exactly the wording of the Quran. Quran says you learn from each other. You learn to embrace the good things from each other. هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. They are, your women are protection for you, and you guys are protection for them. So it's a partnership. And if you want to insist on yourself and your side and your interests and your mode, then that marriage is going to be and your mood, that marriage is going to be in big turbulence.
Wanted to talk about, I'm assuming that everybody here in our audience is not married, correct? Just you could nod your head. So and I recall when I was young as well, I've always had like this thought about like, okay, what I'm looking for in a man, what I'm looking for in a guy. And the characteristics, not only the characteristics of the personality, but how they look as well is also important, the chemistry connection. So I'd like to hear from a religious perspective and from the professional perspective of how chemistry and what characteristic qualities that we should be really focused on, and what religious aspect or qualities that we need to also keep in mind while we're looking at prospective people. And if we could start with Dr. Said, please.
Okay, sorry, could you please repeat the question? I thought we were going to the religious first.
My question was about mainly like when you're looking at somebody as a possible candidate. So I have in mind already like what I'm looking for physically. So there has to be, chemistry I think is very important. If chemistry is not there, I don't see how, or for me, that's my opinion. Chemistry is important. Characteristics, the character of the person, his principles, his values, his moral compass. Those are the things that I look at. But balancing between chemistry and balancing between what we're looking for, the character of the person, and also how religion plays its role in that. What are the things that we should be looking for? Because sometimes we want more of a physical look. Because I sometimes hear girls, I want the guy to be looking like this or whatever, or driving. They look for sometimes even materialistic things. So what are the essential things that are needed in a marriage? Because those could be sometimes very superficial, but at the beginning, they seem like important things, but they become very superficial when you are in the marriage life.
Okay. I may not be able to go into the religious because that's outside my scope of practice, but I'll try to answer it from the psychological point of view.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the question is, what do we look in the other person, basically? Okay.
What are the important things to look for?
Okay. Nowadays, there is a term called emotional intelligence. Just like we have, cognitive intelligence, we do have emotional intelligence. And basically what that means is, how good are you at regulating your feelings? Meaning that how good are you at keeping the negative thoughts from overcoming or overwhelming the positive one? Okay? So in marriage, that's what you're looking for too. If you want to have emotionally intelligent marriage, is how do both of you keep the negative thoughts, because we usually have negative thoughts now and then about our partners. So how are we able to keep these negative thoughts from overwhelming our positive thoughts about the other person? Okay. So we start from, like I said earlier, from knowing ourselves. The best indicator, research has, there's been a long-term research done by a well-known expert, marriage therapist, Dr. Gottman, that the best indicator is how well do you know each other. And he coined this term called love map. Okay? So if you were to sit together and just ask each other, or have questions with the other person, how well do you know each other? How well do you know the likes and dislikes about the other person? So the more you know about the other person, and if that matches yours or not, then you'll be in a safe ground to navigate. Okay? And the second one is the ability for each other to nurture fondness and admiration. So are you, I'm talking about marriage couples right now. Okay? So are you able to, when you ask a question, to remember your spouse with a good term, with fondness, with admiration? If the thought that comes most of the time are those of criticism, then you have to evaluate your marriage. Okay? And the third one is, in times of difficulties, do we turn to each other? Do you support each other? That goes back to being emotionally available. If you do not know yourself, like I said earlier, and you keep to yourself, then you're not going to be available to the other person. So when your spouse comes and wants to talk, how are you emotionally available to hear that person? If the other person's response is mostly criticism, okay, meaning not just complain is okay, we can complain. But if it goes to criticism, because when it's criticism, it's coming to the person, to the self. You are this and you are that, okay? Then that's not gonna foster this communication, emotional communication. If there's contempt, like if there's name calling, again, that's not gonna foster communication or emotional bonding. And the other one is if you become defensive. If I say something and you become very defensive, that's not gonna help you. Okay? So these are what we call the four horsemen: the criticism, the contempt, the defensiveness, and most of the time this is common in men, the stonewalling. Women will talk and men will shut off. They will just zone off. And they usually do that because they get flooded. By flooded, I mean if the woman is talking and physiologically the man is going to be aroused. Okay? And as a self-protection, what they're going to do is they're going to shut off and they're not going to be there present. They're not present there. If they're not present there, they're not going to engage you emotionally. Okay? So far I said 3. Okay? And the fourth one is, and it might be difficult for guys, my apologies ahead of time if I'm wrong, is let your spouse be able to influence you, meaning that when it comes to decision making, listen to your spouse's input. Because by doing so, you're respecting. Okay? The fifth one is to be able to solve problems. Okay, so conflicts usually are in 2 areas. There's the solvable, and then there are the perpetual. The solvable are your day-to-day problems, for example. You'll be able to solve them. And if you need me, I will go later on and explain how you can do that. And then there are the dreadlocks, meaning the ones that you're not going to see eye to eye. The issue is not solving the problem per se. It is how you solve the problem and how you are with the other person when you solve the problem. So once you solve the problem, you can put it aside. You may never agree, but if you're able to, in a very respectful manner and in a very honorable manner, be able to talk about that issue and then agree to disagree.
Thank you.
Can I just finish one sentence?
Sure. Okay.
Please.
Okay. In a nutshell, then, to have a good marriage, you have to be friends. Friendship is a main ingredient, and to do that, you have to be able to understand, honor, and respect each other.
Thank you, Doctor. As a family therapist and marriage therapist, what do you see when couples come in? Of course, they come in to you not because they're happy, because they're unhappy, right?
I wish.
So when they come into your office, it's like there's already a problem that exists. So there must have been something beforehand. So again, my question comes like, before the marriage stage, what are those important qualities that we need to really have in our partner? What do they need to have possessed before we say, yeah, that's it?
Okay, so one of the main reasons why people come and see mental health clinicians is that they don't know how to talk to each other. And for some people, it's no fault of their own because of the way they were raised. So I have a lot of brothers that come in and honestly, they ask me, how can I talk to a girl? I'm not even kidding. I've had brothers come in and say, I don't know how to talk to a girl. Like, I've been raised a certain way, and so it's no fault of the person, but we work on communication. So I basically assist and help the brothers and the sisters in social skills. So that's a huge one, is knowing how to talk to the opposite gender. Because how are you even going to approach the opposite gender for a sincere intention, or if you don't know how to do it? So that's basically, for me, that's one of the main issues, and it's good to know what kind of communication style you have. So there are 4 types. There are passive, aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive communication style. So I'll just go over each of them really quickly. Maybe you guys might identify falling into either 1 or 2. So passive is basically a person that's avoidant. They are not able to express themselves in a manner that they want. They're not confident. They're the shy people. They're the people that usually get bullied. This is like a target of a bully too, unfortunately, a passive person. Passive aggressive is the second one. So these are the people that they're not able to express themselves outwardly, but behind the scenes, they do things that don't match what they're saying. So they may be smiling, but they're really angry, right? Or they may be talking to you and they're kind of folding their hands and they're like, basically, they want the conversation to end, but they cannot say it to you directly because they're not direct people. And then there is aggressive communication style, which is basically your typical bully, right? So this person is overly confident, aggressive, they don't care about the other person's feelings, put downs, criticism, judgmental. That is an aggressive person. And then the most effective communication style, which I think everyone should try to aspire to, is the assertive communication style, in which you are able to confidently say what's on your mind with respect to the other person, showing basically your nonverbals and your verbals are congruent. So what you're saying matches what you're doing, and it's not the opposite. So it's good to know where you fall. So if, let's say, you don't fall in the assertive communication style, and that's okay, it's it's an acquired skill, so it takes time to actually get good at it and get better at it. So just good to identify. And then I think, okay. So okay, you guys know what Craigslist is, right? All right, so what I like to tell my clients is, think about your job description for a spouse that you would put on Craigslist. Okay, I know we're not gonna do that, but just think about it. Like, what would you want on there for a potential spouse, right? So some things to think about are like the person's attitude, their habits and behaviors, family values, life goals, spirituality, background, their career, finances, education, location, are you willing to relocate or not, recreation, social likes, and emotional characteristics. So you have to know what you're looking for. If you do not, that's going to be very difficult for you to even start this journey. So you got to take that step back as well to know what you're looking for in the first place. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to the audience now. If anybody would like to ask a question or make a comment to any one of our panelists, please feel free to do so. Like I said, this is very informal. I don't want anybody to feel very awkward. You know, a question that doesn't get answered, posed, you'll never know the answer without asking it. So please, if you have anything you want to say, you can raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you, or I could read off whatever questions that I have so far.
Meanwhile, can I just, in a nutshell, add the religious perspective?
About what to look for? Absolutely.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, look for two qualities in your future spouse. One is religious and moral commitment, ad-deen, an open-minded religious person, not a narrow-minded, because nowadays we have millions of people who practice religion, practicing Muslims, but they are very narrow-minded, and they are the cause of destruction and mayhem in many Muslim countries. Look at the bloodshed. What is happening in the Middle East, it's because of the Muslim. This is a Muslim problem, perpetrated by Muslims themselves, killing each other. So when we say deen, it means someone who openly understands religion and what's the purpose of religion, and then he or she would conduct himself according to the true religion. Not someone who is fanatic and narrow-minded and he carries the Quran and he jumps up and down and he wants to fix the whole world around him while his house is broken and himself is broken. So number one, an open-minded religious commitment. This is number one. Number two, someone with an acceptable character. The Prophet never said someone who is excellent in his character, because you cannot find such a person. To be a role model and excellent, you have to make an order and wait 50 years and then you can't find him. We can find that person in paradise, but not on earth. Here we are based on imperfection, though we are, aiming for perfection, but we are not going to attain human perfection. Human perfection is attained only in the hereafter. However, we have to strive, we have to work. So someone with acceptable character, meaning avoid certain areas which are very dangerous and you cannot compromise over them. I'll give you a couple of examples. Someone who's mean, someone who's selfish, someone who's stingy, avoid that person. Don't live with him or her. Someone who's a liar, he has a habit of lying. He cannot sleep the night if he does not lie or cheat on people. Someone who's well known in the community for being dishonest, even if he's rich, even if he's intelligent, avoid that person. So these are examples of someone that you really must avoid, no matter how intelligent and knowledgeable and rich and famous and influential they are. Since they have these, faults in them, then you must avoid them, because you cannot have them as partners. However, there are some other things, other problems or defects that are probably fixable. Someone who's not very handsome, it's okay. Someone who's not very rich, someone who's not super intelligent, someone who's not well educated, someone who does not hail from a well-known family, someone who's not very energetic. Sometimes he's lazy, sometimes, but not all the times. These things we can compromise over them because they are fixable in the long run. While the other examples that I gave, you must avoid them.
well noted, say thank you for that. Any,
So, I have a question. You guys speak about a lot of these qualities and traits and a lot of the different buckets you need to kind of figure out what you're looking for and to figure out what you want in that second person. So, is there certain paths or methods you use to analyze the other person or judge the other person?
Do you want to
Are they
answer
very
this?
buckets?
Sorry. I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So basically, how do you analyze the other person? If they carry the specific buckets you're looking for, or
You as a prospective partner,
yeah.
and how do you know, or how do I analyze?
Yeah, as me as a person. And if I'm looking for something that's not achievable, like a genius or PhD in every topic or whatever.
So what you want to do is to find, number one, what is your limit, what can you tolerate, what is acceptable for you, and what are your dreams? Will this person match your dreams? So first you have to know yourself. We go back to the self, your dreams and your achievements, so on and so
Get
forth.
that
And the
question.
second one, like I said
Do
earlier,
you want to
is
answer?
to be able to have this, to be able to know each other with a number of questions that the other person also have to answer. It's not only your likes or dislikes, okay? It's what are your dreams, for example. If a person says, I want to be stay-home mom, and what you would like to do is for your partner to work with you and raise together, that's something that you'll be able to work through. So through different questions like that, from knowing yourself and what you want to the other person, you just list them and then you ask each other.
How do we discover and get to know others and their characters? There are two ways. One, it's public. You ask the friends, family members. You tell them, what do you think of this person? You lived with this person, you went to school together, you were in the same neighborhood. So this is one side. The other side, it is invisible. Invisible even to the parents of that person. It's very, very difficult to detect these characters or qualities. So here you have to experience that person by talking to him or her. You know, don't jump into marriage as we used to do 50 years ago. Today we get engaged and tomorrow we get married, and then we start knowing each other after marriage. This is not good at this time and age. But then God gave us the ability there to be tolerant, even if we knew each other after marriage, and we don't rush to divorce, and we can stay in the marriage because we had more patience and more tolerance. At this time where people are intolerant, and intolerance is increasing as we advance in technology, in science, in materialism, in capitalism, intolerance is also advances with that. So I think you must have some sort of relationship, not physical relationship, before marriage to be able to understand that person very well.
Can I just ask
Yes,
you real quick?
absolutely.
So, like I mentioned before, it goes back to communication. So you have to ask the right questions. Because I see couples that are married, or let's say they're, engaged, and they're having difficulty because they did not ask the right questions from the beginning. So if you, like, for example, do you know what your deal breakers are? Like, absolutely no way. This is my deal breaker. If he or she is like this or possesses this kind of habit, then I'm not even going to consider this person, right? So it goes back to the questions you ask as well.
Just one more thing, just to answer you. Marriage are successful to the degree that the program you choose are the ones that you can cope with. So you have to ask those questions ahead of time. And the indication or the good indicator of a successful marriage is how good of a friend you are to each other. So friendship is a very important factor in marriage.
Thank you very much. We have another question? Could you be a little bit louder, please?
Okay, about the list, you said of qualities.
Oh, what to look for?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
to look for in a person. I've heard that before, and it's a good idea. But then, like, when you have that list, how
Mhm.
flexible you are with it. And I know you touched a little bit about, like that be like, I mean, gonna be, in a way, on the negative part, it's gonna be limiting? And also for Said, I mean, you mentioned about, you know, to select people who are religious, and I've seen that many times. How do you, like, how can you tell a person's really religious and because a lot of people pretend, and that will take us to another subject, you know, like, are you gonna have a courtship, where's the, you know, the border of religion and knowing the person?
Go ahead with that.
Are you sure you want
No,
to-
go ahead.
Okay. All right. So as Sister was saying, all right, you have to be realistic. All right. So the expectations that you have in your potential spouse, they have to be realistic, not idealistic. Do you guys know the difference, right? So you may have this idea of brothers like Angelina Jolie status, and then sisters maybe like Brad Pitt status, but we don't live in that kind of world. I mean, they I don't know, they went it up together, but I mean, it's very rare, right? So you have to be realistic, because I see the sisters in their like late, early 30s depressed because they have this criteria that they can't find this brother, and the top things like physical characteristics, and they can't find that brother, and they just kind of give up. So you don't have to have all the criteria on that job description met. If you have majority of it met, then you're good to go. Yeah, that would be a perfect world, to have every single thing on your list checked off. Yeah, that's basically, we don't live in that kind of world, but if you have the majority where you feel comfortable with the person and, you know, they meet the basics, then you're good to go.
But what are the basics? This is really important, because a lot of people do a huge list. What are the key, most important things to look for? And I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that's a very critical point to focus on. Do you not agree, audience?
Sure.
Well, as the Sheikh mentioned, in terms of, you know, religiosity, I know for a lot of like Muslim brothers and sisters, that's like top, right? So in terms of how the deen impacts their life on a daily basis, so if you guys don't match on that, I mean, there's a huge red flag right there. You know what I mean? So for that's, I mean, religiosity and spirituality, for me, I mean, I've seen that's like one of the big ones.
Money.
Am I answering the question correctly?
Well, let's hear from the audience.
Yeah, this is supposed to be interactive. I don't hear anybody talking.
Let's hear from the audience. What do you guys agree with what the panelists have spoken about so far, or what's your feedback on what's been discussed so far? Please don't be shy. Could you stand up and be a little bit?
Khalid.
Thank you.
About what Sister Maryam just said, how important is the religiosity of not the prospective spouse, but the family, and the degree of which they're practicing, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything from the sisters?
I go back to the question is, what are you looking for? Is that the question?
Not what I'm looking for, the most important things to look for. And I liked what Maryam said, that between ideal and realistic.
And before we answer that question, what you're looking for in others, isn't the first question shouldn't be, do you know yourself? So once you know yourself, you know what you're looking for. The religious part being the first one. But the second one, is that person compatible with me? Does his or her dreams match mine? His or her aspiration match mine? Are the problems solvable? Sister Iman brought the question about problems. You know, there's certain problems that are solvable. The problem becomes when we're in a dreadlock or gridlock. How do we maneuver and how would you resolve those problems? Are we willing to compromise? But most importantly, when we do that, are we able to respect, honor the other person's perspective, and be able to say, okay, this is the part that we do not agree, but we can put aside and respect that you have this opinion.
Okay, and let us begin to wind down. I'll take one more question from the audience, and we'll have Sara Said finish 2 more questions. Are more hands going up?
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
With respect to like what to look for in a spouse, and I agree with all the panelists. One thing that the Muslims, unfortunately, what we have done is abandon the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. You know, we have
of the dunya, we're looking at the houses, we're looking at, how much money or beauty. And that's why we need to go back to basics. So if we can focus on those two main attributes and put those at the top, and we should never compromise those two for anything. And it is not being shallow to be conservative at looking at those two attributes. And then, of course, there's other factors such as compatibility, and other things. But I feel like if you really focus on those two and, work your way down, you will have the majority of the things that you need in order to have a successful marriage. And a lot of the other things are secondary and tertiary. But those are definitely the two that we need to focus on the most nowadays.
Thank you.
Just to add on, I feel it's a very good character and have somebody who is a problem solver than a problem detector. As some people are very good at being radars, but not being to be a partner where they can fix problems as we might face in everyday life.
Thank you.
The brother.
Can you comment on, I'm not sure if this can be discussed later on, whether or not to live with in-laws or when to do?
We're gonna touch about family relations and parents and all that.
Yeah.
We have a whole hour
Let me
to
just
talk.
answer
Yeah.
what Sister Imam mentioned.
And if we can end it with your comments,
Yes,
we could take a
very
2-minute
quick.
break and then
Yeah.
come back for our next hour.
Break?
Well, at least.
We just started.
I know.
Yeah. How do we, Sister Iman asked, how do we know someone is religious or not? Because many people say, I'm religious, I'm practicing Muslim, I'm practicing Christian. But then after 6 months, you find out that he violates his religious principles. My friends, I think religion is not exhibited in the prayers that we do, neither in the fasting, nor in the charity. It is exhibited in our behavior, in our manners. If someone is peaceful, the Prophet says, Al-Muslim, they said to him, who's a good practicing guy? He said, the one whose people feel peace with him. They feel peace. They are not threatened. They are not intimidated. They are not hurt by him or her. That's a good Muslim. So Islam has to be reflected in our manners. What good it would do for me if someone prays 5 times a day, even more than 5 times, 50 times a day. He never misses any nawafil, but then he's hurting left and right. His tongue, his hand, emotionally abusing people, physically abusing people. That's not religion. So don't call it religion. Unfortunately, we look at people, the first thing we ask, does he pray or not? If he prays, we think that he's a good Muslim. But that's not the criteria. Maybe he prays, but he's evil. And maybe he does not pray, but he's good. I'm not saying marry someone who does not pray. I'm saying look at the result of his or her prayers in his or her life, in his or her character. So this is very important. And that takes time. You cannot discover people within 2 months. It really takes time. It takes time, and you have to do a whole set of investigation. You have to hire, some private, what they call them, private investigator to. I'm just kidding here. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. So what do you suggest? Like, if it takes time, that you're going to be, with someone for I don't know how many months, and especially.
My friends, nowadays with social media, you can know about people and discover them much faster than 10 years ago or 20 years ago. By the things they put, the pictures they post, the sentences, what they say, their reaction, you can really discover them. So it's a whole set of things. You can ask friends, neighbors, family members, co-workers, others, and also personal experience. And by the way, Sister Leila said, make a list. It's good to make a list, but do not prolong this list. Because once you put 20 things, you are not going to get married, believe me. You don't meet these requirements. Put 3 items. These are the priorities. These are the fundamental ones. I cannot compromise on 3 items, on these 3 first items. Others, I might compromise on them. So do not make a long list.
Sister Shri.
And last comment, because we have to get on to the next topic.
I think Adam and I have been married for almost 3 years now. I wanted to
It's
share
been
something.
torture, Adam.
And for
I'm
me,
joking though.
it was really challenging because getting to know people, because I come from a kind of family where everyone in my family saw their spouse once and then they got married. And it was literally just having 15 minutes conversation and then marriage. So I was constantly trying to see how I can get to know the person I'm leading me to marry as much as possible. And we went through charts that I found really practical, and a few of my friends are using, just to answer the question that you were asking earlier. So what I did, the list that she was saying, I broke it down to the priority, like Said was saying. So there's education, spirituality, and family values, all these things, and I put it through 3 different time frames. We wrote like past, present, and future, where we were in the past, where we are, what we're looking for, and then methodology on how do we hope to, what are we going to do, what is the method that we're using to achieve these goals and the progress for it. And it actually took us, when I did that, it took us a few months to fill that chart out, and each person filled their own. And it was really unique in helping us. Later on, we had, basically, it was kind of like an interview after studying all these charts. And I know this sounds kind of too detailed, or maybe I was a little bit paranoid and like going all these details, but it really helps a lot. And now looking back at it, at the end of the day, as much as you try to look and try to get to know, there is an aspect of tawakkul on Allah that you have to do, where you reach a point where I know these main things, and there's so much unknown that these main things are giving me enough assurance to know that I'm putting myself in the right hand, and I will leave the part of it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when you get into marriage, that's when the real getting to know happens. And and I think also we say that in the past, I keep hearing the comments of how in the past, divorce rate is going up or down because in the past we had higher tolerance. I really think that in the past there was a lot of fear, and more people were staying in unhappy marriages because there was a lot of stigma, and there is still a very strong stigma with divorce and all these things. So I think a part of it is not just intolerance, but it's also that now people understand that there are many options, and that so that's just to tawakkul on Allah. That's the bigger aspect of getting to know someone, I think.
Thank you, Sister Shuru. Should we take just a 1 minute, stand up, kind of move the blood around a little bit, and just gather about you? I've got these questions, a lot of